elephants in the room. I am so excited for today's episode. I'm here with someone so special and beautiful. On the inside and out, she's just radiating. So today I'm with Andrea Rustic. You guys have probably seen this girl before on your phone, somewhere in your life. And we're going to talk about all things sobriety today.
Yes.
Addiction, all the things. So like I said, I'm so honored that she came on today and that she's willing to open up and share her heart with us, especially on a subject that I feel like isn't talked about a lot and something that is so important,
Definitely.
and something that needs to be talked about.
Couldn't agree more.
You're like, yes, that's why I'm here. Okay, awesome. So obviously you shared like a little bit of your story online. I've watched some of your YouTube videos, all this stuff, but take us back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? When did, things start for you? When did things on YouTube start?
I started, this is going to sound so crazy and it makes me feel so old. I started uploading on YouTube 16 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, girl.
That's
I should not have been on the internet. I don't know why my parents were like letting me do that.
Yeah.
But
it was a different time.
It was.
Yeah,
It was the Wild West of the internet.
Yeah.
But I just started uploading videos one summer because I was just bored.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom would be like, take my laptop, make some videos, be creative. Honestly, I think she was just glad I was home.
Yeah.
Not getting into trouble. But yeah, I just started uploading videos. I uploaded this one video to a Justin Bieber song and it just went viral. And at the time, viral was like, I woke up and it had 10,000 views. And I was like, there's no way Justin Bieber won't marry me after this. Like this,
what's
right?
happening?
This is how it happens. But after that, I just kept doing it. It was so fun to like have a creative outlet and have people online give me their feedback. And it was also, at the time, I was like bullied so heavily in school. So that was like a way for me to make friends with people in different places and with people who had things in common with me.
So cool.
Yeah, so that was really cool. Did that for a while. And then as soon as I turned 18, I moved out to LA.
The classic story.
All by my lonesome. It was.
But that is really young to like make that big of a move, especially to a place like this.
Across the country.
Yeah.
By myself.
Because you grew up in Indiana, right?
Indiana, yes.
Okay.
Fort Wayne, Indiana. Nothing there except cornfields and Amish people.
There you go.
So it was definitely a culture shock.
Yeah.
Looking back, I'm like, how did I possibly have the nerve to do that? Like if I was 18 now, I think I'd be terrified. But I was excited. I knew what I wanted to do in life.
Yeah.
And I just went for it. And the rest just kind of snowballed. I kept doing YouTube, was given these opportunities.
Totally.
And just went for it.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that you had, that's such a unique experience for like a kid to go through.
Totally.
Like, I can't even imagine the way that just affects a kid. Obviously it's exciting, but I feel like there's also probably things that were really hard about it.
Definitely.
And I think that, like, generally, I've been kind of in this world surrounded by people, whether it's artists or influencers, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I feel like people like dehumanize them so much. It's like, oh, like they have these perfect lives and like, it's like there's this idolization of these people.
Absolutely.
And they think that they're just like superhumans and that they can do whatever they want and like, go wherever they want and that there's no effects. And so it's like, I think that's one of my goals too, just with this podcast is like, I really want people to see that you guys are real people, with real experiences, and real hardships.
Absolutely. That is literally the entire reason that I decided to talk publicly about going to rehab and struggling with alcoholism. Because there was, when I really started to get serious about wanting to get sober, it was 2020. Mm-hmm. But I didn't talk about it until last year. And those, I think it was like 3.5 years, it just felt like I was living the biggest lie and felt so inauthentic because I have, before that, been very open online about mental health. Anything I was struggling with, I've always tried to be as honest as I could be. And this was the one thing that I just was so afraid to talk about. Mm-hmm. One, because then it made it real. Mm-hmm. Two, because then I'd actually have to put the work in and get sober. And 3, I was just embarrassed. It's like shameful,
Yeah.
You're young, you just want to go out and party with your friends, but I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'm blacking out every single time. Mm-hmm. And so I finally just one day decided that I didn't want to live the lie anymore. And also, it's not who I am as a person. I'm not a deceitful person. And I just wanted to be honest and get rid of that layer and just start the journey of healing.
And you've truly done that so gracefully.
Thank you.
It's so funny because obviously I knew of you and stuff, and then I started seeing videos of you on my For You page and, talking about rehab and all these things, and I was like, just so blown away because I was like, you just handle it so well. And like just the way that you communicate is so honest, like so non-judgmental. So it's just been cool to see you kind of start leaning into that. And I feel like I relate to you in a lot of ways because when I went through my divorce and I grew up Mormon. Well, that's my whole thing.
Yep.
And I had adopted parents growing up. So like my whole life I was like so scared and like ashamed, you know? Yeah. And then when I like got married, I was like, oh, my life's perfect now. And then when that fell apart and I left the church, I was like, oh, I can't hide. Like I can't hide anymore. And I was kind of in a semi-public relationship. So I was like, okay, like I need to move on with my life and I can either like do this inauthentically or I can just like air it out for the world. You know what I mean?
Dude, yes.
And it's like so scary, but then once you do it, you're like, oh, it's like, it's so freeing. And I think you probably relate to this, but like, I think part of the reason I wanted to speak out to be like, okay, I'm just going to admit that my life's kind of this mess, which it's not, it's all
for the time being.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, because when I was in it, I was looking at people online and being like, no one understands me.
Right.
No one is in this situation. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I'm flawed. And it's like, once I spoke out about it, I was like, oh my gosh. Other people understand.
Yes. And that's the best feeling. The best feeling. I get comments like that too. And like, I think back to when I was in that first couple years of knowing that I had a problem, but not knowing how to tell anyone or where to even begin healing. And I think back to like, if I could have just seen someone my age just be totally honest and totally blunt about it and the whole process, it would have been so different. I think.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get back to the start of this because I'm so excited to get into all of this and all your story. So I always like to start the podcast by asking a little bit about your childhood. Okay. I tend to think that sometimes that can correlate sometimes with what we go through. So tell me a little bit about your childhood, the good parts, the bad parts, all the things.
So I grew up super religious as well. I grew up in a very Catholic family.
Got it.
I went to private Catholic schools my whole life and hated it. Yeah, I definitely have some religious trauma.
Me too. Me
and my sister call it Catholic guilt, where we just feel guilty for doing things because of the things that were just
so ingrained in you,
instilled in your brain from the moment you're born. So, yeah, that was like a lot. But I knew even at like a super young age that I was questioning my sexuality. I was questioning the things that I was being taught, and I just always felt like I was pretending to make my parents happy.
Right.
But once I moved out, I kind of began to find myself a little bit more and kind of accept myself, and that, kind of healed itself. It's still healing, but it's, that was a huge help to get out and see the world. But other than that, I had a really wonderful childhood. Like, my parents were high school sweethearts, still together.
That's so sweet.
Like, still so in love too. They leave each other little notes everywhere. And no addiction in the family. My parents, I've never seen them drunk. Like, I really was lucky. Like, we grew up not rich, but not poor. If we were struggling, I never knew it. My parents are the kindest people on planet Earth. They couldn't hurt a fly. So, I don't know how I ended up this way.
No, that's amazing. It's so good to have context.
For sure.
I think one of the like taboo things about trauma is that like if we have good parents or like a relatively like normal childhood, we tend to like so invalidate those hard experiences.
You're so right.
Yeah, we went through when we were young because like I know people who have had super amazing parents, like never really struggled necessarily with money, like played sports and the whole thing. But they have like religious trauma or whatever it is. They don't have a healthy relationship with their parents because of whatever, or even friends or other family members. And so I think it's so important to like normalize the fact that there is still trauma rooted in all of it and just the experiences we go through. And religion in general, like it can do so much damage. And it's crazy to say. I didn't know that you grew up Catholic. So Mormonism and Catholicism are actually really similar.
Yes, they are.
And I didn't know that until a couple years ago. And then I met a Catholic and they kind of told me. So it's like a lot of the same like they have a lot of practices,
It's
all the
hardcore.
things.
It's
It's intense.
It's hardcore religious.
Yes. And it's so hard because I think, like you're saying, when you grow up in it and it's all it's just like, it's literally the way that your brain thinks. And so, like, trying to unlearn that, it just feels like a mind, like, it's just, it's so
the deprogramming.
Yeah.
It's like trying to, like, even just small things, I still catch myself being like, oh my God, that's horrible, I can't do that. And then I'm like, no, I can't.
You're like, I'm actually okay. It's my brain just needs to.
Like, when I was single for a while, I'm in a relationship now, but when I was single, because I'm bisexual, and I would, like, want to talk to girls, but there was still that guilt of, like, is this wrong? And it's like it's just such a crazy way to try to have your brain tell your brain to stop doing that.
Right.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely a process.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's amazing. That's good insight on your family and your parents. I'm so thankful that they're supportive and amazing.
They're amazing.
That's so sweet that they're high school sweethearts.
I know.
So cute. I feel like that's so rare.
I know. I'm like, are you guys making this up?
You're like, wait. But that's also hard because I feel like that's hard expectation of, like, I have to find, like, the same thing.
Right.
Especially in this generation.
I know. And out here.
yeah, in LA too. That's a whole other thing. Awesome. So, I guess kind of leading out of that, so things start picking up on YouTube, and then you're able to move to LA.
Yeah.
And when did you start drinking? Like, at what age? And how did that kind of transition from just being a normal kid in a small town to then, being this influencer YouTuber with this success and all these eyes on you and kind of this freedom that you had and money and all these things? Like, how was that transition? How did that transition your drinking habits at all?
Oh, so much back then, so much. I started drinking when I was, I think, 14. It was the summer before my freshman year. Me and 3 friends shared a Mike's Hard Lemonade, and we thought we were gone. We told like a couple sips, we're like, do you feel it, girl? But I didn't really start heavily drinking till probably my sophomore year. That's just like a year later. But I don't think I was ever a normal drinker. Like, even before I really was, like, at rock bottom, like, even in high school, I was always the girl that was, like, a little too drunk.
Yeah.
Or a little too sloppy. I got arrested twice before I was even 18 for public intoxication, minor, I think it's called minor. I got expelled for drinking at school. Like, there was just always a lot of alcohol present.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was because I was struggling internally in this very religious environment, feeling like I can't be myself, so I'll just bury it with alcohol. But then once I moved, like you said, like, the freedom, the money. I mean, I was 18 years old, supporting myself, making more money than an 18-year-old should, and I could do anything. There was that little bit of internet fame. No bar or club was going to turn me away.
Right.
Like, it was just a free-for-all, and I took full advantage of it. And it definitely escalated slowly over that time.
Gotcha.
But I think when it really took a turn to where it was like, this is not normal, was the pandemic, which I'm sure that is for a lot of people. But
so much isolation in that period.
Oh my God.
And everyone's stuck at home.
Right at the beginning of the pandemic, too, I had just gone through a breakup, and I was just devastated. I thought I was going to marry this person. It was like a whole thing. And it was the end of my world.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't want to feel it. And I went to my coping mechanism that I knew at the time, which was drinking and burying it. And it got so out of hand. I mean, like, I was like waking up at 7 a.m. taking 4 shots.
Yeah.
And then waking up at noon on my bathroom floor. And then drinking more. Like, it was crazy.
But that's really hard. Like, I feel like when we go through those experiences, like big breakups or whatever, like, it seems like there was a lot kind of against you. Like, it was the pandemic. You went through a breakup. You're, like, isolated. Like, that is so easy for us to, like, draw towards
100%.
Whatever it is that we use to cope.
And it was so normalized, too, during the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was like, we're doing happy hour on Zoom.
Right.
It's like everything was like, well, we'll just sit around and drink. And I was like, hell yeah, we will.
Yeah, it's like, what else is there to do?
This is awesome.
Yeah. So funny. So that's kind of when things escalated a little bit for you. Do you feel like that was when you started to kind of be like, okay, so a little bit of an issue?
Definitely. I knew internally, like, this is not normal, and I need to, I knew that it had gotten to a point where it was out of my control.
Yeah.
And I needed an outside source to help me get to a place at the time I thought where I can drink normally.
Right.
No, I needed help getting sober. But I knew that, but I didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I knew what to do about it either.
Walk me through like what that feels like, because I feel like it takes a lot to get to that point of like, okay, like I need to like maybe get help, or like something needs to change. It's like we can recognize maybe something and start to accept it a little bit. Like, what was that process like mentally, getting from the place of like, okay, maybe this is like a little too much, or okay, like this is something that needs to be dealt with?
I think, honestly, me and my mom always say we suffer from too much self-awareness. We're like hyper self-aware of ourselves and everything we do. And so I think I knew deep down way longer than I admitted to myself, but getting to that place of admitting to myself, like, this is bigger than me. This is something that I'm gonna need help with. I actually think I remember the exact moment. There was a moment where I woke up in my bathroom, in my bedroom. So I was upstairs. I woke up on the floor. It's like a tiled floor. I woke up and I was like, how the fuck did I get here? What have I been doing? It was like 1 p.m. It's like, how did I black out this early in the day? The last thing I remember was taking a shot with breakfast just because why not?
Right.
And I was like, this is like not normal.
Yeah.
And then I went downstairs and took 2 more shots. It's like that feeling of, I don't want to be doing this, but I want to be doing this more than anything in the world. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like with anything especially with alcoholism, because it is a disease. I mean, addiction in general.
100%.
But like, it's so easy when we start to like feel that wound or whatever it is. It's like, to cope, sometimes the thing that hurts us is the only thing that makes it feel better.
Absolutely.
You know? So then it's like, oh, this is hurt, but let me just, you know what I mean?
And I had no tools other than that at the time. And like a saying that somebody at one of the 8 meetings I go to told me the other day was, forgive yourself for how you coped when you didn't know any better. I just love that.
So good.
Because I feel like a lot of people with addiction can sometimes like carry all the things they did during addiction as like this weight of regret. But that's something I'm trying to work on, to be like, that I did the best I could at the time.
Right.
And I worked to get better, and I can be proud of that.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like that's such a crazy concept. I love that you said. I've actually heard that before. Like, at that time, like, that was the knowledge, that was all that you had at that time. So it's like, we can look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have done this, but it's like, well, you didn't know like, you are a different person now than you were at that time, you know? So it's like, we hold ourselves to this standard, like, oh, but I could have done this, or I could have done that, and it's like, you probably couldn't have, you know?
Right.
It's like, we're all trying to do, like, our best, and whatever it is, relationships or whatever, and so it's like, that's beautiful that you've been able to like identify that and give yourself grace, which is like a whole other part of the process. But so take me back to that moment when you were on your bathroom floor. Like, what was going through your mind? What was going through your body? Like, what was that experience like, if you're comfortable sharing?
Of course. I'm an open book. It was very humbling, to be honest, and shameful. I felt a lot of shame and it felt like rock bottom. There were so many more rock bottoms after that, believe me. But that was one of the rock bottoms that stands out, because it was a moment of feeling powerless and out of control, because I was.
Right.
The disease had completely taken over. It was making the decisions for me at that point. And yeah, it was just a moment of like, you know, when you just sit and you just stare at a wall and you don't even realize you're doing it and you're just thinking.
Yeah.
It was like one of those where I was just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And like, how do I stop doing this?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I can't even imagine, and I know I shared this with you, and everyone watching this knows it, but, you know, both my parents have struggled with drug addiction since as early as I know. They had, you know, a period of time where they were clean when I was young, up until like 6, and then they have been in and out of it kind of since then. So so they both struggled with addiction, and they haven't been successful in recovery. Obviously, they've had moments and stuff. But I think kind of what you're talking about, like that moment when you kind of realize, oh, this is bigger than me.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not in my own willpower that I can just stop doing this.
Right.
I think that's something that is so important, because I hate that. That's one thing that I hate, is I think there is this really tricky dynamic with the person, the loved one on the receiving end, whether it's a partner, a family member, a friend. It feels sometimes personal, like that person's addiction. You know, it's like they love this more than they love me, right? Yeah. And it's like, obviously, from your perspective, I'm sure you can understand or agree that like it's not personal.
It's never personal.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like being able to admit and say, this is like bigger than me. I feel like a lot of people don't get to that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't give people who struggle with addiction that space to like really own that and not as an excuse, but as like like that's serious. Like that's a real thing, 100%. You know?
I feel like before I went to rehab, I had such a naive perspective of addiction. And then when I went to rehab and I met these people from all different walks of life, all different ages, and somehow we all had this one massive thing in common that is so hard for so many people to understand, but we all understand each other so well in that one area. It just totally changed my perspective. Like, addiction does not discriminate. It can affect anyone and everyone. And it is a disease. It 100% is.
Absolutely. I have to ask too, do you feel like maybe there's a part of that shame or guilt that kind of stems from that, you know, that shame and guilt from the religion that you grew up in?
Oh, definitely. I think that will always, hopefully not always, I think that has continued to linger over me, that like that guilt or shame for doing things as a human, or just for being human and falling down and picking myself back up, that kind of stuff. Like, I think that will linger for a while.
Yeah.
But I think even in just the last year of recovery, I've learned so much, and I've put so much work into healing myself and the things that I didn't even know were weighing me down so much that like, it's so beautiful how much your mind can heal in such a short amount of time, that I don't think I'm going to feel that forever.
100%.
And even just knowing that gives me relief.
Yeah.
You know?
I totally believe there's healing for that stuff. But it is so hard because like you said, it can get so ingrained in you. And then even on top of that, which is a whole nother layer of everything you've gone through, you have eyes everywhere. So it's like when you're going through something hard, you know, even before you had started to realize I'm an alcoholic, like this is an issue, anything in your life, like that, what is that feeling like when you're like, oh, this is hard, I'm going through this thing, this is uncomfortable. How do you deal with that like pressure and that feeling of, oh, people are watching me, people know what I'm, like, how do you deal with that? Because that's got to be so like debilitating and isolating.
Oh, it was, absolutely. And like all of last year, I tried so hard. Well, until I talked about rehab, like up until then, the year prior to that, I tried so hard to make it look like I was okay. I was like posting once every couple months. Like in the posts I would post, now I look at them and I'm like, you're fucking wasted, bitch. Like you could see it in your face. Everyone knows it. But I think that I actually felt pressure to talk about it from myself, not from other people, and I'm so glad I did. I feel like once I talked about it, I was met with such open arms, and for some reason I just had this idea of like, no one's gonna fucking get it. Like, this is gonna be embarrassing, but I'm just gonna put it out there so people can stop like bugging me that I'm falling off and I'm not posting and I'm just like leaving the internet. And it was like amazing how many people reached out with similar stories, or just saying like, my loved one is going through something similar, and hearing your perspective helps me understand them.
Totally.
So I feel like talking about it relieved the pressure in a really odd way.
That's amazing. I think that's what people don't realize is vulnerability. Like it really does create just freedom, and that's what connects us as humans. 100%, you know, it's like we can't connect with people when we're like having these skeletons in the closet,
or
hiding.
Surface levelly.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, like let's be honest. There's all things that we have and that we've gone through, and like they affect us, you know. And then there's real things like addiction and disease. Like that is something that I think so many people are going through. Yeah. And a lot of them probably don't realize, you know. And a lot of them maybe know, but they're too scared. They have too much shame, too much guilt to like get help to talk about it, and so seeing you online, that's so cool that people are able to be like, wait, this amazing person that I've seen and looked up to, like, they get me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's so much healing just from that. Even from having that connection, like, this person gets me. You know what I mean? You feel so seen.
Totally. Even I've like found a few influencers now that are sober, and I'm like, oh my god, I want to be.
You're like, wait, are we friends?
Are we like, come on, girl, what are you doing here?
That's so awesome. Okay, so kind of going back to that moment when you realized, what does that look like after? So it's like you realize, okay, I have this problem. I need help.
Right.
It takes a lot to then get to rehab.
To act on it.
Yeah, like to actually act on something. It's one thing to recognize something and identify it, but then to actually take that step. What did that look like for you? Like what behind the scenes was happening to really get you there?
So from that moment, it wasn't until another 3 years later that I ended up in rehab. And because of the disease and what it is, for those 3 years, I just kept telling myself, and I genuinely believed it every time I said it too, that like, no, I just need to take a break from drinking and then I'll be fine again. And then the break would be 2 days, and then the break would be a day, and then I'm back to drinking every day, and then I'm back to drinking all day every day. But unfortunately, during those 3 years, I was in a relationship with somebody who enabled it a lot for their own gain. Kind of took advantage of the fact that if I was drunk, they could just ask me for whatever and I'd probably be down, you know, money, whatever. But once I got out of that relationship and moved out of where I was living and kind of started this new chapter, I was trying to get sober on my own, and eventually got into a new relationship with my current boyfriend, who's 10 years sober from opiates.
Wow.
Incredible.
Wait, that's actually so sweet that you guys have that, like,
I know, and what's crazy is when we first started dating, he had no idea about like that I was trying to get sober, that I never struggled, I didn't talk about it.
Right.
But obviously, over the course of the relationship, like, it's hard to hide, and he eventually figured it out and was just so supportive, and he's actually the reason that I ended up in rehab. He was just so supportive, so encouraging, and like came out and visited me. He drove 3 hours there for an hour visit and then 3 hours back. Like, just the best.
That's amazing. That just makes my heart so happy to hear that that's so awesome.
I know, I love it.
That's so special. Okay, so he was kind of what helped a little bit get there. So you said kind of for 3 years,
yes,
you were like, okay, I know this is a thing. I'm going to do this on my own. I got this, but kind of in a toxic relationship at the time.
Yeah.
And so then you get out of that relationship, you start dating your new boyfriend. What's his name? Derek. And then from that point on, what was it really that sent you to that point? Was it just that the addiction got worse?
Definitely. I mean, they say that every relapse gets worse. It only gets harder.
Got it.
And it's so true. I never believed it, but it is so true. Every time that I went back to drinking, it would be like, okay, I'm back to drinking. I'm just going to have 2 shots. And then, or I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to drink wine. No hard liquor. I would drink 3 bottles of wine in an hour. And so it just kept escalating every single time that I would relapse. I was putting in no real effort. I was just existing. I just became a shell of a human. I like lost all my passions, lost myself. And what led to me actually going to rehab the day I did was I had been at home alone, and my boyfriend hadn't heard from me for like 4 hours. And he lives right down the street, had a key to my house. So he came over and he found me passed out on my back, throwing up, which obviously that's how people die. And he just lost it and was crying. I don't really remember that day.
Yeah.
But what I do remember is being in the shower. He was like trying to clean me and he was crying. He hates that I tell people that, but he was crying and just begging me. He was like, I just want you to be okay. I just want you to get better. He's an angel. So that next day, I woke up and I went to rehab.
Wow.
And thank God I did.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just like taken back.
It's a crazy story. And I think that I would consider that probably my lowest rock bottom.
Yeah, like the rock bottom that was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like this has gotta.
It was crazy. I mean, I literally could have died.
Yeah, so I think I saw a video of you talking a little bit about like, so when someone is laying on their back and they're throwing up, so people can die from that, right?
Yes.
It's like
you could choke on your own throw up, die. I mean, it's like a common way that alcoholics die too. And he's, you know, obviously he's sober from a different substance, but he's been around that kind of stuff his whole life.
Right.
And he was just like terrified at the thought of me falling victim to that as well. So thank God for him.
So that is the moment that you were like, okay.
Yep.
And so you said that following day,
Yep.
you went to rehab.
Got up, went to rehab.
You're like, all right, we're going to rehab.
Stopped at Chili's. That was my last meal.
Gotta do it, yeah. So funny. So how did you, you know, find a place? I feel like this is great for people watching.
Yes.
You know, if you know that, hey, I'm struggling,
Yeah.
I need help. How did you find a place, you know, rehab facility that you felt like was the right choice for you? What did that process look like?
Well, my boyfriend called my mom, obviously, when that happened. It kind of filled her in. So she was calling different places,
Gotcha.
looking into my insurance. And then my boyfriend's neighbor is actually 10 years sober from alcohol.
Wow.
And so he called her. She was looking at places. It was kind of like a little crew that rallied around.
Yeah.
They were like, we're going to find it. We got it. And yeah, we ended up finding Betty Ford, which is out in the desert. And I went
And that's when kind of it started, the journey started.
yes.
And I know you've kind of talked a little bit about, you know, relapsing,
Yep.
going to rehab, trying the outpatient, trying the inpatient, and then kind of struggling with that back and forth. So you started with outpatient, or did you start with inpatient?
Well, I tried to start with outpatient first because I didn't want to commit to doing inpatient.
Right.
And the first day of outpatient, I showed up drunk. So that didn't go well. And that was before my boyfriend had found me. That was like, okay, fine.
Okay, got it.
That was my way of being like, fine, I'll
I'll do outpatient. Yeah. Okay,
yeah, so
gotcha.
then that happened and he was like, you need to do inpatient. So I went to inpatient for I think 3 weeks and then got out, relapsed a short while later, went back to inpatient, and then from that inpatient did sober living for a couple weeks. I can't remember how long, but it was still in the desert, so I was still
Got it.
like away from LA. We were like breathalyzed, drug tested, all that kind of stuff. There was curfew, and from that I came back and did outpatient, and then got kicked out of the nest. Trying to fly on my own. But I did have a few slip ups after that too.
Yeah.
But I feel like as of late, I've really been trying to like do the things that are uncomfortable that I don't
Yeah.
want to do in this journey, like going to AA meetings, like volunteering, being of service, like really throwing myself into the sober community. And it's really helped. It's really helped. I feel a lot less lonely in getting sober.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm like very confident.
That's awesome. That's really amazing though that you can, and that you have. I mean, you've been so vulnerable on social media. Like you obviously posted kind of that first video, like, "Hey guys, this is what's going on,"
Yeah.
and then kind of came back and was like, "I relapsed." You know, that takes a lot.
Oh man, I was so scared.
Yeah, that takes a lot to not only like, I'm sure go through that personally behind
Yeah.
closed doors, but then to get on, you know, an app and have millions of people commenting on it and sharing their opinions. And obviously you said you've received a lot of positive feedback, but that's scary, and that takes a lot. So like when you first relapsed the first time after going to inpatient, what was that like?
Oh.
Like was there a lot of shame? Was there a lot of guilt? How did you wrestle and like get past that bump? Because I can't even imagine.
Oh my God, the first time I relapsed, it was like, I beat myself up so hard because I just kept saying, I threw away 30 days. I think I had 28 days. And I was like, I was so close to my 30. I threw it all away. Fuck it. Like, I might as well just keep drinking. And I did. Because the first couple relapses I had that mentality. And after those couple times, there was one more my most recent relapse where I was just like, I can't afford to think that way anymore. Like, I just have to pick myself back up and focus on recovering again.
Yeah.
Because the longer I sit and say, damn, I fucked it all up, I'm just gonna have the mindset of like, might as well make a week of it. We're already here. Why bother?
Yeah.
So I've learned to just be kind to myself and just immediately pick myself back up.
Yeah.
Instead of just sitting in the shame and the disappointment and
Right.
the guilt.
And setting realistic standards for yourself.
Yes.
Because, like, relapse is a real thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen it with my parents. Like,
Yeah.
the few programs that my mom has done, like, she's had one successful run through rehab, but, you know, she's relapsed. And it's like, it's so part of it.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no easy fix.
There's
you
not.
know, it's not like, oh, okay, just
I
get
wish.
better. You know,
It sounds good.
You're like, thanks.
Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, you're like, it's crazy. No, but I mean, it's clearly a process.
Yeah.
And probably so just painful and humbling, but what do you feel like you've learned from, you know, relapsing and completing, you know, a program and then being like, okay, now I have to go back. What do you feel like you've learned? How do you treat yourself now when you relapse? Like, what is that experience like now versus then, if that makes sense?
I think what I've learned is I can't just want it really bad. I have to actually do the things to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I used to think like, well, I want it so bad. Why isn't it working for me? Like, I want to be sober so bad. It's all I want. Why can't I stay sober? And like, I wasn't doing any of the work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have to do the things to make that happen, which sounds like so obvious, but for some reason, I just thought wanting it bad enough would be enough. So I learned that I have to take the time to go to meetings, talk to other sober people, wake up and journal, wake up and meditate, go for a walk. Like, I have to take care of my mind so it doesn't go back to the place where it feels like, oh, I just want to forget, numb. So now the way I treat myself in the situation of a relapse is with kindness, with grace, and like just reminding myself that I'm human. And relapse is a part of recovery. They always told us that in rehab, and I always thought like, why would they say that?
Yeah,
like, that's so discouraging.
Right.
But now I get it, because when I got out of rehab and I didn't agree with that, and that relapse is a part of recovery, and then I did relapse, I was like, I just ruined it all.
Right.
I have no other chance. I just fucked it all up. Now what do? But if I would have just like really understood,
like, oh, this is a part of the process.
Yeah, then I might have had a different outlook, and it might have gone a different way. But I feel like that's a huge thing.
Well, look at you now.
Look at me now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so beautiful to see, and just talking to you today, but then also just even online in the videos you've shared, like seeing just that vulnerability, but also like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep going. You know what I mean? And like, that is real. Like, that's what I feel like people need to see and what people need to hear. And so like picking yourself back up.
Yep.
I'm good. We're gonna go at this again. We're gonna keep fighting.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just so cool to see the way that you've not only shared it, but just that you are like really just fighting for your life and for everyone, and like following along on the journey, like being able to follow along the journey online, you know, and all these people.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's so inspiring. And so I just love to hear, you know, the ways that you've maybe like been hard on yourself, but then you've been like, okay, wait, I'm not going to do that. This is what I'm going to do. And I think generally we should all do that, you know, and whatever it is that we're going through.
Absolutely.
So easy to be like, oh, I'm the worst. Like, why am I doing this again? Why am I falling into this habit or whatever it is? And obviously addiction is so different because it's a disease.
Yeah.
But just in general, like that kindness and love for ourselves. I think part of religious trauma that I feel like I go through is like, I don't know that I've ever seen love in an unconditional way. Like, there's this love of like, love but fear. I have to be hard on myself and like, do you know what I mean? But it's like,
of course,
love is like this unconditional thing.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's not supposed to be, it shouldn't have conditions, you know? So it's like, even when we are doing things that we don't want to, even when we've let ourselves down or let other people down or fallen back into anything, it's like, if we truly loved ourselves unconditionally, we wouldn't like not stop loving us because we did something. You know what I mean? 100%. Like loving ourselves with that unconditional love.
That's such a huge part of sobriety too. Like loving yourself enough to know that you don't have to go back to the way things were. And like, I don't know, I think that when I was in my peak addiction, I just hated everything about myself. I hated the person I had become. I wasn't myself. I became a liar. I was deceptive. I was manipulative. I would do anything to get alcohol if I needed to, without an ID. Like, it was crazy the lengths I went to get what I needed to get when I wanted it. And it was just so not me. And I just hated myself. The more I did it, I hated myself. And the more I hated myself, the more I did it.
Yeah.
And so to get out of that and feel like I don't have to be that person anymore. And I actually can like who I am, and I can be proud of myself. I can be like reliable. I can be a shoulder for someone to cry on. I can pick up the phone when somebody calls me and remember our conversation and be there for them.
Right.
It's just that whole process helps with self-love. Like it's all just one coming together.
Yeah. and I kind of want to touch on something you just said, because I feel like, especially from someone who has had loved ones with addiction,
Yeah.
kind of what you talked about, like you really weren't yourself when you were in addiction. And it's so hard, because I think that I look at, you know, the way that my mom, you know, has treated me and things that she's done. And like when she is in active addiction, like it does not matter who you are. She will do anything to get what she needs to get her fix of drugs. And so it's like, it's so hard in those moments, because you're like, you feel like you kind of lost that part. Like you feel like they're not there.
They're not there.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
where is this person?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you have this relationship with them. You know that there's love there. You know that they have good character. That they're not wanting to be this way. So it's like it's this like wrestle of like, I love this person, but like they're not there.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. And it's even more of like a mind fuck to be in that like when I was drinking a lot while dating my current boyfriend, he would say like you turn into a completely different person. And in the beginning, he didn't really understand that I was like really struggling with addiction. He just thought like, oh, she just likes to drink a lot, I guess. But then once he understood, it was like, it was really hard to hear that when he would say like, you just get this way or that way. And then it also just makes me feel more shameful, more guilty. Right. And then I just think to myself like, oh, well, I just want to numb that now. Right. You know, so it's so hard. It feels like there's no solution, you know? It really is. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's so crazy that you say that, because I feel like, you know, as I've seen even other loved ones just in addiction, it like builds and builds and builds. And even with my mom, I feel like over time, like because of the addiction, the things that she's done, the actions that she's chosen to do, you know, she lost us, like custody, all that stuff. Yeah. And it's like, as it progresses, there's more baggage. So it's like more she needs to numb herself from, more that she's like, you know, feel. And so when she's sober, she's like, I just feel everything. Yeah. And I can't feel it. That's, you know? Oh my God, I like so understand that. When I first got sober in rehab, it was like the first 2 weeks felt like every emotion that I had worked so hard to not feel and spent years burying, I finally had to feel them. They all came up to the surface. And it was so overwhelming and heavy. And thank God there was like 10 therapists on call at all times. Right. Like it was crazy. Like, I need someone to talk to. I was crying every day. Yeah. But it was a lot, and it was really hard to work through. So I get that. Like it is like a snowball effect, where the more you want to numb, it's like it's harder and harder and harder. It's like, I can't. Now what do? I get sober and I have to deal with all of this. Right. Yeah. What would you say to someone who does have a loved one who's struggling with addiction, and they feel like, how could this person do this to me? How could this person, like, does this person not love me? Like, what would you say to someone to encourage them that person loves them, and that it's not like, what would you say to that person that's like, well, they just don't love, like, why are they doing these things? It doesn't make sense, right? Because they can't make sense of it. Right, and it doesn't make sense. Yeah. Because that person doesn't want to be doing that either, and that person does love you. But unfortunately, with the disease of addiction, your brain tells you that you'll never love anything more than this substance. Like when I was in my peak addiction in a relationship, like I wanted nothing but to be the best partner and to be there. And I never wanted to hurt him or do anything that could put our relationship at risk. But the second he walked out the door, all I was doing was finding a way to get alcohol. Right. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense, but it has nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? Like it's a me thing. Yeah. It's me struggling with myself. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I want to hurt you. I just don't know how to handle this thing that I'm struggling with. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation is also, I mean, it's so healing and good for me. It's so amazing to
glad.
talk to someone who
Yeah.
has struggled and,
Yeah.
is in the position that you're in, because it's so good for me and anyone who's listening. I know a lot of people who are listening, they have loved ones with
Yeah.
addiction. To be able to kind of get a little bit more empathy
Right.
for you guys and being like, okay, wait, like this isn't
100%.
about me. You know what I mean? As hard as that is, because it's like you want to internalize it. You want to feel like, well, if they loved me, they would just choose me over the drug or the alcohol. You know?
I've had people say to me like, why you choose alcohol over me? And I'm like, I'm not choosing alcohol over you. As the amount that you don't want me to drink, I want to not drink 10 times more than that. The last thing I want to do is drink. But I don't have control over that right now, and I don't know how to get control over it. So I'm gonna continue to drink, but it has nothing to do with you.
Right.
It's my brain that I'm struggling with.
Do you feel like there's kind of a misconception about alcoholism and addiction where people think it's a choice when it's really not?
Of course. I think there always will be. I mean, at a certain time in my life, I think I probably thought that way. Because I just didn't know any better and had never had to, thankfully, I had never had to think about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody who struggled with addiction. And it had just never crossed my mind that you say you don't want to do it, so just don't do it.
Right.
But now that I've kind of lived the experience and struggle with this.
You're like, I get it.
I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe I ever thought of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the craziest thing. I feel like when we're young, especially when we grow up in certain religions, like we just have our minds made up.
Right.
We just think like we know. Right? We're like, okay, well, like this is how it goes. And like, I was so like that, so prideful. Like, I'm never gonna do this. I'll never do this. I'll never do this. Like my parents were divorced, so I'm like, oh, never gonna do this. And then life just hits me today, so I'm like, oh, okay, And then you have this like empathy and understanding. Even when I was younger, and this is so not a fair comparison, but like I used to look at divorced people and be like, I would never marry a divorced person. You know what I mean? Just that was kind of my, and I would never leave the church. Like,
Yes.
You know what I mean? You kind of like silently judge these people because you just think you know. And then when life hits you and you become an adult and go through these real experiences, you're like, holy, oh my gosh, like this is real.
It's so humbling. It's so
humbling.
The first day I got to rehab, it was the most humbling experience. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was completely out of control. I couldn't leave. I had a little scanner on my badge where they track me where I go. Like it was
that's a lot, especially when you came from kind of this life of freedom. You're self-employed. you can get like special treatment really, and like people are gonna kind of worship the ground you walk on, all these things. No, and then you go to this thing where it's like, well, we have rules and these are your expectations, and you're like, wait a minute. You're like, why did I sign up for this? But that's like probably a really big shift. Do you feel like the career that you have and kind of this whole world, LA, the freedom, the lack of structure in kind of what you do you think that contributed?
Oh, 1000%. I think not having a schedule and having free time every day, I took full advantage of it.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is nobody knew.
Right.
Nobody was waiting for me to show up at work. Nobody was waiting for me to show up wherever. I was doing my own thing. I was responsible for myself.
Yeah.
And so I could drink all day long and no one knew.
Right.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of isolation in this industry.
Yeah.
Whether you do music, which you do music too, or you're in the influencing space or whatever, like there's a lot of isolation.
Yeah.
And so it's like you kind of can do whatever you want, which when we're kids, we think that's what I want.
Best thing ever.
But then you kind of see like there is something good about structure.
Oh my God, yeah.
Routine and like having something to be responsible for, because it can affect a lot of things, which I kind of want to lean into rehab. Yes. So I want to talk more about what was that experience like. So you come into inpatient.
Yep.
You have roommates.
Yes.
You have rules. Like, what was that experience like? For anyone who's watching this and is like, I maybe want to go to rehab.
Yeah.
I'm scared. Like, what is that like?
Well, first I'll just say rehab is the best thing I've ever done. I'm very grateful for it. But yeah, I was terrified a lot of the time. But so when you first get to rehab, you go through detox to make sure you do it safely and you don't have a seizure or withdrawals. I had, the first time I went to rehab, because I went to rehab three times. First time I went to rehab, I showed up sober. So I wasn't in detox very long. But I did have a roommate for 2 nights. Thankfully, she was like so cool. She was my age. We still keep in contact.
That's awesome.
And then they took me over to the hall. I was in a co-ed hall and I was so scared. I was like, God, there's going to be all these like crazy people, tweakers, like I don't belong here. I'm not that bad. And then I get in there and it's like people my age, people older, people just hanging out, reading books, playing ping pong. And it was such a cool, interesting experience to just I guess have the realization that I was just so naive and wrong. And I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm probably worse than a lot of people here. And to just hear everybody talk and share stories and to relate with these people that I would have never met anywhere else. It was just such a unique experience and I'm so grateful for it. There was a lot of therapy, a lot of group therapy.
We love therapy around here.
We love therapy.
Okay, we're back. I got to do that so it like syncs. Okay, let's see. Oh, we were talking about rehab. Yes, you were talking about how you loved it. It was hard. It was scary.
Yes.
And humbling. But then you were like, okay, I am supposed to be here.
Yep. Fully threw myself into it. Did all the things. I was put into a room with 4 roommates.
4 roommates?
So it's all rooms with just 2 people in them. And then they have one room called the Swamp with 4 beds. So I was put
How do you land there? How does that happen?
Just a lucky girl, I guess.
It just happened. You're like, I get 4.
But when they first told me that, I was like, hell no.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this. One, because I have PTSD because my house was broken into while I was home a couple, 5-6 years ago. And so I was like, if there's people moving around at night, I'm going to freak out.
Right.
But the second I got in that room and I met the girls, I was like, this is going to be fine. And one of the girls is like still one of my closest friends to this day. We all just got along so well. It's really crazy. Like the people you meet, everybody says, you're going to have lifelong friends from rehab. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm out of here and I'm never coming
you're
back.
Like, see you later, everyone.
I came back a month later. But no, I really do have like a lot of friendships that I hope last a very long time.
That's awesome. That's so sweet because that's like such a unique experience. I mean, and probably relating with people is like such a weird, not weird, such probably like a joining kind of friendship.
Totally.
Like such a rare,
it's like part of the classes that they do is like having one prompt and everybody goes around and kind of answers and tells their story based on the question.
Right.
And it's such an interesting way to kind of realize like, oh, we're all very alike and I'm in the right place. Like just the stories of people like where we'd hide our alcohol bottles in the house.
You'd be like, this is where I hid mine.
And it was like, oh, I thought I was the only one that did that. Or like, I thought I was so smart hiding it in this little spot. I used to hide a bottle of vodka in a rolled up yoga mat.
I feel like that is pretty smart.
Apparently not, because like 3 other girls were like, oh, I did that too.
You're like, oh shoot, okay, it's not as smart as I thought.
So it's not that great.
But I mean, I would never find that. So
right.
From my perspective, that's a smart spot. That's so funny. So it ended up being, it was probably obviously very hard, but like now looking back,
yes,
you understand why it was the way that it was.
100%. Like obviously while I was there, I didn't want to be there. There were so many times I just went to bed crying, felt alone, felt scared. But now that time has passed, I can look back and know that that is exactly where I needed to be. I'm so grateful that I went when I did. And everything I learned from that experience has helped me get to where I am today.
Amazing. So this is so important because I feel like for people or for yourself, looking back at Andrea, how long ago was it that you first went to rehab the first time?
Almost exactly a year ago.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know.
So looking back to you a year ago, if you could go in that bathroom to that girl and sit down with her and encourage her, what would you say?
Oh, I'd just give her a big hug and just tell her, you don't have to live this way. You don't have to. And it's okay to admit that you can't do it on your own. I think I've always been somebody who hates asking for help. I want to do everything on my own. I want to, like, if there's a way that I could get everything possible done for like a video shoot on my own, I'll do it. So asking for help with such a vulnerable thing was really hard. So I think I would just tell her, you can reach out. You're going to be okay. And this isn't the end of your life. It's the beginning.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's
so
such a good question.
No, but it's true. It's like, yes, that's so sweet. And to kind of lead into this whole topic, what do you feel like people on the receiving end, so, you know, someone who loves an addict, whether that's a relationship, a friendship, family member, how can we love them better? How can we understand them better? How can we walk with them in active addiction, in between, you know, in recovery, in sobriety? Because I think there is kind of this struggle with, I think boundaries are important.
Absolutely.
You know, when you're walking with people that have these addictions, but also, like, how can we love on these people and do it? Like, what's the best way in your opinion?
For me, and obviously I can't speak for everybody, but for me, in my relationship, once he finally understood the gravity of the situation, if I were to drink or relapse or slip up, when he approached me with love and just being like, hey, like, this isn't forever. You slipped up, but you're okay. We're going to get through this. I'm not going to abandon you. Like, that for me gave me the confidence and the courage and the strength to want to continue on fighting for sobriety. I think that when I was relapsing a lot or in active addiction and I was met with anger, it only made me want to drink more and drink. And there's this saying, you drink at somebody, which I was doing a lot. You're mad at me for drinking, then I'll go fucking drink some more. So I think for me, what helps is empathy, love, and patience. But it's tricky because on the other side of that, it's like you can't, there's a fine line between being empathetic and being enabling.
Yeah, I think that is the trickiest part, is like, you want to love, you want to walk with patience, but then where does that line fall between that unconditional love and patience and enabling? You know, it's so hard because it's like you want to support them, you want to trust them. I think I found that hard in my relationship with my mom, is like, I want to always give her the benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, like, I believe that what you're saying is true. I believe that, you know, these are honest things that you need or whatever. But then it's hard, you know, because it's like, okay, am I contributing to the problem? Do you know what I mean?
100%. And like, even when I first like got back from rehab even, and I would say all these grand ideas of like, oh, I can't wait when I hit my year sober and this and that, or I'm going to go to the mall and I'm going to go to Vegas and I'm going to be sober, blah, blah, blah. And for me, it's like, I want to be met with, oh yeah, that sounds great. But I also have to understand that, like, my boyfriend, for example, he is going off of my actions, and my actions have not matched the things I've said in the past. So all I can do is show you with my actions that I'm trying to be better. And I think for him, that helps him want to stay and be supportive if I'm showing that I am putting in the work. Because if I'm putting in the work and I have a slip up, it's not the end of the world. 100%. But if I'm just giving up and it's like, oh, it's just a slip up, I'll try again. I think that's when it's like, this is a cycle. But I don't, you know, I'm not the spokesperson.
No, I mean,
I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I think that's really powerful. And just like understanding that there is a level of action that should be behind it. But also, like, I think we're all on a journey, and it's like, we cannot just be like, oh, well, I just want this to happen. I want them to just realize, I want them to just, you know, it's like, it takes time getting there. And if you can handle it with love, that's obviously the best approach. But I think there is kind of this big, you know, like, middle ground that it hasn't been met with people who are in addiction and then their loved ones, you know, where there's this misunderstanding, if that makes sense. It's like, why do they do this? Why don't they just get sober? Why? And, you know, and then on the other end, it's like, it's not personal. Give me grace. Like, this is bigger than me. And so it's like, there's this disconnect that I feel like, you know, and even like we talked about, like with boundaries and all these things, like, you know, there's seasons that I've been able to be in a really active relationship with my mom. And then there's seasons that I haven't been, you know, just because obviously her addiction affects me. I worry about her, all these things. And so it's like trying to find that balance and be like, how can I love you in each area when you are in active addiction, when you're in recovery, you know, how can I do this while also loving myself? And it's such an interesting like line, you know, to try to find.
It's so difficult because I feel like there's not one solution. There's not one answer because things are constantly changing. People are constantly changing. And sometimes you do have to think about like, is it healthy for me to keep trying to pursue this relationship when this person isn't trying as hard as I am in the way of, you know, getting sober? Like my very first breakup at the beginning of COVID. I feel like I've lived so many lives since COVID, but that
it feels like it's been a long time since then.
I'm like 3 boyfriends ago. One of the huge reasons that we broke up was because of my drinking. This was before I had even like acknowledged to myself that it was a problem. But because of that, I felt like, oh, no one's ever gonna stay with me. If I tell them that I'm struggling with addiction, they're just gonna leave. And it created this whole like secrecy and like, I don't know. It's so hard to try to explain addiction to people who haven't,
who don't understand.
It's so, I wish there was a better way. But
I mean, you truly are a walking example of someone who has been fighting and has been so it's like, even just talking to you, it's like, it's so opening my eyes.
Oh, I'm glad.
And I know so many people who are watching this that are probably like, oh wow, you know what I mean? But it's just, I think because it's not talked about, because there's not a lot of people who open up about it, especially relapsing and kind of the journey, you know, of it all. So I think you're a walking example of that anyways. And it's obviously not one size fits all. All situations are different and unique. And, you know, like you said, therapy and trying to, you know, heal from these underlying things, I think can help obviously too in those relationships, like trying to coexist with people that are struggling. And I think that therapy obviously has been, you know, a big part of my journey, and it seems like yours as well. Definitely. And a big part of rehab, it seems that therapy is. Do you feel like therapy and working through childhood stuff, adult stuff, relationship trauma, just trauma in general, do you feel like that has been a big part of becoming sober?
Oh, absolutely. I think a huge part of why I was drinking to the extent that I was to bury the things that I didn't want to talk about, or to pretend like it never happened, pretend like these things aren't real, when in reality all I needed to do was just talk about it and get it out of my body. And doing that, it felt like such a release and such like, it just felt lighter. I remember in rehab one day in our small groups, we have an all-women small group, where one of my assignments was to make a timeline of my life and what I feel led me to addiction. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm ready to present mine. And I paused and I just started bawling. And I was like, I can't do this. And then they went around, did everybody else. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And I did it. And I like went through the whole thing. I was bawling the whole time. But once I finished and everybody was like giving me hugs and they were so proud of me, it felt like 1,000 steps forward in sobriety. Like it just felt like I didn't need to hold on to these things anymore. They were out of me. It was like just the craziest experience. So I think through therapy and just talking about things, as simple as it sounds, it's just been so healing.
So that's like a big part, do you think, for people? That's amazing to hear, because I feel like therapy, even, you know, it's scary for people. It's scary to be like, I need help, you know, and even when I got to that point in my life, I was like, I like need help. I'm like not okay, you know? And going to therapy was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it like changed my life.
Yeah.
Like I definitely would not be okay if I
same.
didn't go to therapy. Like, you know, it's like you look back, you're like, oh wow, you know, and I think there's this weird stigma around it that like something's wrong with you if you go to therapy, but it's like we all need it.
Oh yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
I'm like, everyone needs it, whether we realize we do or not. But
Whether you want it or not.
yeah, but it is really humbling. It is hard to like have to own what you've gone through.
Yes.
And also own the ways that has led you to where you are, you know?
I think that's a huge part of recovery too, is taking ownership and responsibility for your part in a lot of things. I think being honest with myself about a lot of situations helped me kind of being honest with myself helped me be honest with my sobriety.
Yeah.
And hold myself accountable. And because in the past, if I relapsed, I would not tell a soul, and I would just be like, yeah, 40 days sober.
Well, I mean, that makes sense though, because that's scary to like be like, hey, I set my mind to something.
Yep.
And it didn't work the way that I thought it was going to.
Right.
And I think we all tend to do that. Like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And then, you know, it doesn't happen. And it's like, it can feel like such a failure.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so it's like being able to own that is so good. And especially talking about it to anyone, you know, which is scary to do, but so
totally.
cool.
But I think too, even if therapy feels like a scary thing for somebody, if you're struggling with addiction, I would recommend going and just sitting and listening, whether it's an AA meeting, NA meeting, there's CA meetings, there's so many different meetings for everything under the sun. Just going and listening and seeing yourself and other people's stories and hearing how they've kind of come to terms or gotten through certain things is also so helpful. I feel like it's like a little bit of a first step if you're nervous about getting into therapy and having to like spill your guts.
Right. Being able to kind of go and observe and hear other people's stories.
Yes.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. You've obviously kind of shared bits and pieces, but what do you feel like has helped you, or what do you feel like is your best advice for someone who wants to get sober?
I would say give yourself grace, but put the work in. I spent a lot of time in sobriety not putting the work in, and it's called like a dry sober, where you're just white knuckling it. You're just sober, but your mind isn't really sober. I'm still thinking about drinking. I'm still wanting to drink, but really throwing myself into AA and like going to the in-person meetings, taking responsibilities, like signing up to help clean on the weekends, like doing those things, keeping myself busy. That has been the biggest shift for me. Staying busy and just having things set in place for those moments when you get a craving.
Right.
Like if I get a craving, I know either one, I'm going to call somebody and talk for a half hour, or two, I'm just going to go outside for a walk, take my dog for a walk.
So having like a list of things, like kind of coping strategies that you can look at and be like, okay, I feel this way. I want to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to do these other things.
Yeah. And even like trying to be present in the moment of like, okay, right now I'm feeling like I really want to drink. Why am I feeling that way? And just trying to like really dissect it and be present with yourself and figure out why you're feeling that way and just let it pass.
Because there's probably like an underlying reason.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
That's awesome. So good. Okay. Well, the last thing I kind of wanted to ask is, who is Andrea now? What are you leaning into? Like, how are you feeling in this new journey? And like, what are some of your proudest moments? You know, just tell us all about you. Tell us what's going on behind the scenes other than, you know, you walking in this journey, just in your personal life, the things you love to do.
Andrea now is a whole new person. I think that I lost myself in addiction. I stopped doing things that I loved. I stopped doing things I was passionate about. I stopped talking to people. Like I just isolated really hard. And so I think I'm rediscovering myself. I'm painting again. I'm creative again. I'm singing again. And I'm just like, I feel like I'm just enjoying getting to know myself again, which sounds so crazy, but I really feel like for 3 years, I just became such a shell.
Yeah.
All I cared about was drinking. I was just miserable. It's so sad to think about, but I'm enjoying life.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy just going for a walk and seeing fucking plants blooming.
You're like,
I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. I used to hate the sunlight.
Yeah. And you're a dog mom?
I'm a dog mom. I'm like working on music again. I'm uploading on YouTube again.
So awesome.
I just feel like I'm me again, little by little. And that's the greatest gift I've gotten out of recovery. I feel like I'm myself again.
It's amazing. It is so, so encouraging to see someone just so full of so much light and love, and just the fight that you're on and the journey you're on. And I mean, look at you. Like, I'm just so proud of you, even just sitting here. Like you are just so well spoken, so honest, and you can just tell there's so much joy that's radiating out of you. And I know you've been putting in so much hard work. So you are a living testament to anyone who's watching this who may be struggling with addiction. There's hope. There's hope for them.
Like such a compliment.
No, truly, it's so encouraging to see people not only speaking out about it and the ups and the downs, how it ebbs and it flows, but that you are here, you are fighting for it, you are living your best life, you're learning, so like all these things, it's like, it's beautiful. So I'm so inspired by you. I'm so thankful that you came on.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. If you guys want to support anything that Andrea does, I'll link all her things. She does music.
Yes.
You said you've been working on music, YouTube, obviously art. I've seen some of your art. You're so talented.
Thank you.
That's also so fun that you do art. That's like such a healing thing, I feel like.
Oh, totally. Both my parents are artists, so my family's like very artsy fartsy. So
I love it. And you
so
also
fun.
like to cook, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I love to cook too. Cooking is my favorite thing because it's like I get so present when I cook. I'm just like, oh, I'm here. Like I kind of forget that.
It's therapeutic.
Like all your problems that are in your head, you're like, oh wait, I'm just focused on this banana bread. You know what I mean? Which is so good and so healthy. So yes, thanks so much for coming on. And yeah, like I said, if you guys want to go follow her, support her, please do. And I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks.